Sam. All right, it looks like we're coming back to order here at 1:06. We'll do our 6.9, consideration of workshop on a potential community facilities district for the Gwinnett Mixed Use Project Administrative Office. Ben Ruckelman, I see you sitting in the chair, so go ahead and I'll give the floor to you.
Good afternoon, Board. Ben Rickelman, Deputy County Administrative Officer. I'm here for a workshop session regarding community facility districts, particularly in regard to the Gwinnett mixed-use development. We have a team here, the Gwinnett Development Team, led by Kevin Case. We have Bound Counsel here, consultants, and then also James Hamill, who's a director with the Joint Power Authority, California Statewide Communities Development Authority. So I'll lead it off with Lou Feldman, consultant with the project that will help orchestrate the presentation and bring the various parties in to give an overview of what CFDs are, community facility districts, and how it could apply to this project.
Much better. Honorable Supervisors, my name is Lou Feldman, and I have been in public finance for 45 years in California. It's my pleasure to address you and give you information with respect to how we would like your help in financing the infrastructure that will bring the Gwinnett Valley Mixed-Use Project to fruition. We've put a lot of work into today, and the idea isn't just to inundate you with a bunch of information, it's to actually have you ask questions, get clarification, and then understand what we're doing. We're trying to be, thank you. We're trying to be as transparent as we can, and some of this may make your eyes glaze over, but we've tried to condense it so that doesn't happen. We're going to give a brief overview of the development status, and Kevin Case will do that. Then we're going to introduce community facilities districts, the legal aspects of it. Brian Forbath, who's with Stradling, who's here, is the bond counsel, and he'll explain that. We'll talk also about the financial, legal, and administrative framework, how much local government is burdened with administrative tasks, and how we've tried to make it so that this is a non-recourse, no liability, taking everything and putting it in the hands of CSCDA, California Statewide, and James Hamill's group, along with the bond counsel, to administer this in a way that is painless for you and seamless and brings economic development and jobs without burdening the general fund. James Hamill, who is with CSCDA, as Mr. Rickelman mentioned, is here, and he will talk about how CSCDA can issue these bonds on your behalf. So each presenter will give you their area of expertise, and we'll be here for questions. We'll go to the next slide, and that's going to be explaining what our agenda is. I just did that. And then the next slide, please, introduces all of the people who will be on the team, including James Hamill, Todd Smith, who's the bond underwriter who would purchase the bonds and sell those bonds in the retail market or to an institution. Brian Forbath, I mentioned. One person who's not here today is Susan Goodwin. Susan is the person who puts together the tax formula and does the administration as a third-party consultant. And she's a wonderful person, but she couldn't be here today. And then finally, we will choose an independent trustee, a bank that will represent the parties to the bond issue and make sure that everything really goes through an escrow, all conditions are met, and everybody walks away happy. And we end up with money, you end up with infrastructure from that money, and we all end up with 2,886 jobs. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide and introduce Kevin Case, who is going to talk about where we are on the development process.
Good afternoon, Board. Good to see you again. It's been a little while. I wanted to just bring you guys up to speed. We are advancing on the project, and I think that's what everybody wants to hear. We definitely want to hear that. And I saw Mr. Rasmussen there too in the lobby, and he said, "Are we still starting construction next year?" And I said, "We absolutely are." So we've been working with Maria Turner, saw her back there, as well, to get our subdivision maps and all that in. So that'll all be coming in here before too long. So we're working diligently, as we all know, working through CEQA and MMRPs, mitigation measures, and permitting and so forth is where we're really have our team right now hyper-focused on that, as well as our civil design. So again, our goal is to break construction in April. This is one element of our capital stack of part of our financing for the project. Obviously, it's not our only source of it, but this will help us for the development of some of the infrastructure, of some of the roads and some of the utilities and so forth, the things that we don't see, but cost a lot of money. So anyway, we're, again, very excited. We really appreciate your support. It's going to be a lot of questions and answers. I've been working with Lou and his team now. We started this process, I think, in 2020 when we were teed up, ready to go before, and even after 5 years, talking about your eyes glazing over, still a lot of this stuff doesn't even make sense to me. So it's pretty heavy duty, but again, today is really about question and answers. What the county, want obviously the county and particularly you as the Board of Supervisors to be obviously comfortable with how we're moving forward and with the team. Lou, like I said, we met about 5 years ago and came highly recommended, and he's really put together, I think, for the state of California, really a rock star team. I think really best of class when it comes to covering this, and we appreciate again the opportunity. We did meet was 2 months ago, I believe, with some of the staff and just to help them kind of Q&A as well and answer some of their questions about the bond financing. So I'm not going to take your time. I'm not an expert on this subject, so I'm going to sit down and be quiet, but thank you again for your time.
Ben, go to the next slide. Thanks. Good afternoon, Board. Brian Forbath from Stradlin Yacht Carlson Routh. Pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. So my role is to serve as bond counsel to the transaction. So as bond counsel, I represent CSCDA in the transaction, and we render all the legal opinions that are necessary for bonds to be issued and sold out into the public to the investors. So my job is sort of to oversee the legal proceedings to make sure that everything's put together correctly and complies with law. And then there's also certain other aspects that we'll talk about as we get in the presentation. There's one of the big benefits for bonds, some of these municipal bonds, is that they can be issued on a tax-exempt basis as long as certain requirements are met. And so my firm works together to make sure that those requirements are met so that bonds that are issued are ultimately tax exempt. In other words, that if you buy a bond, the interest that you receive on that, you don't have to pay federal income taxes on. And that's important because that means the bonds could be issued at a lower interest rate to investors because they don't have to pay taxes on it. So it's an important aspect of what we do and our role in the transaction. So I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the board with the community facilities districts or Mello-Roos, but Mello-Roos was essentially founded back in the early 80s after Proposition 13 came into place and sort of really restricted the way that public agencies could fund public infrastructure. So Mello-Roos became a tool that would allow either public agencies or developers working with public agencies to finance public infrastructure to benefit new development or existing development actually too. And it's really a way that allows an amortization of upfront costs. In other words, we've got a project that's going to cost $50 million today to build this, and it's going to serve a community for 50 or 60 years, 30 years at least. How do we sort of amortize that cost generationally amongst the residents who are going to benefit from it? And that's what Mello-Roos serves a very important role in that aspect of it. Another key aspect of Mello-Roos, in addition to financing public infrastructure, is the ability to finance ongoing services, which includes the maintenance of that public infrastructure as things age and degenerate, that there's special taxes that can be available to sort of repair, maintain that infrastructure, to pay for the removal of debris from drainage basins, to fix stormwater drains, et cetera. That's all able to be financed through Mello-Roos. You want to go to the next slide for me, Ben? So what is a community facilities district, or a CFD? A CFD is a legally distinct public entity that's established underneath the Mello-Roos Act, and it's designed to provide infrastructure and services without burdening the agency that forms it. In other words, it's a non-recourse liability of the public agency that forms the CFD. The public agency establishes a CFD as a distinct entity with specific geographic boundaries and authorized for purposes of infrastructure development. Eventually, CFDs will issue bonds, and those CFD bonds are payable solely from annual special taxes that are levied on taxable property within the district. And we're going to talk about, I got another whole slide that talks about special taxes and how those are levied, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But special taxes that are levied on the property are collected on a property tax bill. They show up and you're going to pay them just like all your other property taxes that are due in December and April, and pay them when they're due. In order for a CFD to be formed, it requires a vote of either the registered voters or the landowners that live within the boundaries of the CFD. I'll just stop. If anybody has a question along the way, please feel free to stop me.
Please continue.
Yeah. And so the CFD special taxes have to be voter approved by 2/3 vote of either the landowners or the registered voters within the district, depending on who lives there. And again, there's no financial liability. The bonds that are issued are secured by and payable solely from special taxes on the property. And if the special taxes don't pay, then there's a covenant to foreclose on that property to recoup the special taxes that are not paid.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you're talking about the taxes, is that levied on the property actually within the Greenock project, not
Correct.
without?
Just within
Not
the Gwinnett
outside.
property, yes.
Okay.
So we would draw a specific boundary around either all of the property or portions of the property, and there'd be a tax that would levy on just that property within the boundaries of the CFD.
But not through, not,
Not on anywhere else in Lake
Okay.
County, yeah.
thank you.
Okay. We go to the next slide, Ben, thanks. So why use Mello-Roos? Again, it's a mechanism to finance public infrastructure. It provides a lot of flexibility. And as Kevin mentioned, for a lot of developers, it's an important aspect of the capital stack. It's just a piece of the puzzle in terms of how they pay for and finance infrastructure. It also allows a significant amount of upfront funding that might not otherwise be available, because bonds can be issued relatively early in the development cycle, and maybe in amounts that might not be able to be achieved, or a much higher cost through private financing. It also provides a lot of flexibility in terms of, unlike an assessment district, I don't know how familiar you are with assessment districts, but assessment districts, you can only levy an assessment for the special benefit that a property receives from the improvements that are to be constructed. And so it's a constitutional test. And so it's stringent because an assessment only requires a 50+1 vote, whereas a Mello-Roos special tax requires a 2/3 vote. Because it's a special tax, it doesn't require that the properties within the district receive a special benefit. They just have to benefit from the improvements on a reasonable basis. And so it provides a lot of flexibility in terms of what improvements can be constructed and how they're paid for and how the CFD is ultimately established and set up. We go to the next slide. So what can a CFD fund and finance? I mean, mostly CFDs are finance backbone public infrastructure. They finance roads, water, sewer, drainage, parks. Those are the public facilities that CFDs are mainly used to finance. In addition, CFDs levy special taxes to pay for the costs of administering and operating the CFD. Administrative costs are also part of a key component of what the special taxes are levied. And then again, in order to finance the improvements, these are all public improvements. All of these improvements must be owned by another governmental entity, whether it's the county, if there's a water improvements by a water district or a sanitary district, they're owned by a public agency. Or if there's school facilities to be financed, they need to be owned by the school district. Next slide. So a CFD has what we call a special tax formula, or a rate and method of apportionment. And that is the methodology pursuant to which that properties get taxed underneath the CFD to pay for debt service on the bonds and pay for the public infrastructure. It's the rate and method provides a mechanism for the annual levy of the special taxes to satisfy what we will call a special tax requirement. And that special tax requirement is established each year to determine, okay, what do I need to levy to pay debt service on the bonds? That's one component of it. What do I need to levy each year to pay for the administration of the CFD? That's another component. And then are there other facilities that we're just going to levy special taxes for directly to pay for the cost of those public facilities or services that are to be provided by the CFD? But what's really important is the CFD establishes, the rate method, establishes a maximum tax that has to be disclosed to future property owners, that this is the maximum amount of tax that you can ever be levied on in any year. That tax can escalate up to 2% a year for facilities, or it can escalate more than that for services. But those taxes are statutorily required to be disclosed to property owners when they purchase their homes. I'm going to go to the next slide. So just some other considerations about a special tax formula and how they work. It's important to know that a special tax underneath the Melrose cannot be ad valorem based. So it cannot be based on the value of your home. It doesn't fluctuate based on the value of your home. And so a lot of times special taxes are based on square footage, where certain square footage or lot size, where the bigger the house, the higher the tax, the larger the lot, the higher the tax, etc. This is part of how it gets established. But it's also really important that the special tax is developed in a manner that ensures that there's always sufficient taxes available to pay debt service on bonds that are outstanding, that are sold to third-party investors. Again, I represent CSCD, I don't represent the developer. And so our goal and what we will work for with James Hamill and Susan Goodwin is to make sure that we've got a special tax formula that sort of is bulletproof, that essentially there's always going to be sufficient taxes available to pay debt service on the bonds, assuming that development is there. Again, as I mentioned previously, there's not a special benefit requirement. Instead, the Melrose Law provides a lot greater flexibility in terms of how you can assess folks. So in other words, certain homes that might be in an elevated area with benefit from greater views could be taxed in a different way than other places that don't have those views. That's just for instance, the different tax zones. And again, importantly, a CFD allows the ability to tax developed property and undeveloped property differently. And that's an important concept to know because, again, in terms of risk and reward here, undeveloped property, of course, is riskier than developed property. If you have a developed property with a completed home on it, that property is definitely a lot more likely to pay their taxes in a downturn or whatever, where it's not going to have any development risk associated with it. So this allows the flexibility to tax developed property first, undeveloped property second, so that we can size a structure, a transaction that provides the most security for bond owners. Next slide. So again, just some key components of the rate and method of apportionment. Again, it's voter approved. It establishes a ceiling or a maximum tax on that can be levied each year on property owners. And again, as I mentioned, the tax can escalate for facilities to pay for public infrastructure only up to 2% a year. But if there's a tax to pay for public services, that could be at a higher rate of like CPI or 4%, that would more align with how services, the cost of providing those services may escalate.
And thank you for reiterating that. If there's something else that you have to reiterate, we can just kind of, move forward.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah. The term of the tax is set forth, and then it also, the collection of the tax is on the county property tax bill. And then I'm going to turn, if there's no questions for me, I will hand this over to James Hamill over at CSCDA to discuss how CSCDA can assist the county in administering, establishing, and forming a CFD on its behalf.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. My name is James Hamill. I'm a managing director with CSCDA, or California Statewide Communities Development Authority. We're a joint powers authority that was founded by CSAC and the League of California Cities back in 1988. You are a member to this authority. You were one of the first members, actually, in 1988. Of the over 530 members that we have of cities and counties on a statewide basis. Throughout California, we issue bonds on behalf of counties and cities, ranging from nonprofits to affordable housing to what we'll talk about today, infrastructure financing. In California, in this area in infrastructure financing, we've issued almost $500 million or $500 million in bonds in this area for 47 projects statewide. What we do on behalf of the county is really assist you in terms of taking the burden of doing these types of CFDs from the county's perspective, but that does not mean that it takes the power away and the decisions away from you as a county. So you are still involved deeply, your staff is involved. We are doing this on your behalf, so we're not taking any powers away from the county on its own to do. So that's a little background on ourselves. In terms of the process and how you participate with us, as I mentioned, number one, you're already a member, so you don't have to go through that process. But number two is if you were to move forward with this project and wanted CSCDA to issue the bonds and administer the district for this, you as a board would consider and adopt a resolution that authorizes us to form the district, to issue the bonds for the district, and then do the ongoing administrative requirements for the district itself. In terms of those ongoing requirements, a lot of times counties, cities, districts want us to do this and like us to do this because if there are issues with the districts, delinquencies, anything associated with that, we handle that. You don't have to bring in your county council or any other outside parties to do that. In addition, on the tax roll, when the special tax is put on, as Brian pointed out, it has our phone number, our name, so the county is not getting phone calls directly on what is this and why is this on the property tax roll as a whole. So in terms of process, that's how you get in this. I won't go through the credit requirements but in detail, but mainly these are the standard requirements that we have in the over 600 million that we've issued throughout California. We've never had a default, which is great, and that's because we do have these stringent requirements that are above the state requirements by law to do. So these would be integrated into what you as a board would consider when that resolution came. Go next slide, please, Ben. So I've already touched on this, but in terms of the process, if you go from the top to the bottom, the first step is the request, which would be for us to take this over and issue the bonds here. Then we handle everything going forward. We handle the public hearings, we handle all the formation, we handle the landowner elections. We work with the team, as Brian pointed out, in terms of marketing the bonds, and then the transaction closed, and that those funds are made available to the developer and the team. Now, the thing is, again, you are in control of all this. We are just doing the heavy lifting on all this on the front end and the back end. Next slide, please. So basically, this cuts out into what is the county doing, what is the developer doing, and then what are we doing. And I'll probably more focus on the bottom part because the top part I've already talked about. The developer has already talked about what they're doing. But on the bottom, so annually what we will do is we will put this on the tax roll. We will work with your treasurer tax collector to do that. If there are any continuing disclosure requirements, which there are for these, we handle those. If there are lot splits, if there is a foreclosure, which hopefully there is not, we handle that from our end. And then if there is any arbitrage or rebate calculations that are done, we handle that. So Essentially, we are a tool here to help in these types of transactions as a whole. Again, not taking away the power and the decisions from the county. Whenever we do these, we work very closely with staff, multiple calls, making sure that you know as we move forward on this, that you are part of that process. And if anything needs to change or has to change, you can make those changes accordingly. So next. So Lou, I don't know if you want to.
So I know it's a new vocabulary, and that's always fun to learn new things, special tax rates and stuff, but this is really, it's pretty simple. What we're doing is we're putting a voluntary tax on our property, we're collecting it, we're using it for debt service and to maintain the public improvements. All of the improvements that are put in are public improvements, as was mentioned, and they must be done to county standards. This is purely financing. What we're talking about, it has nothing to do with public bidding and other things like that. This is a very complicated project. We're going to talk to the Public Works Director to explain how we're going to do the contracting and get into a lot of detail. James and his company will help us, or his agency will help us, as well as working with the investment banker. The investment banker has to prepare this in a customary fashion to make sure that it's accepted by the market and we get the best rate. The best rate, the more proceeds we want, the lower our rate has to be, because it's just, I think I just won a Ford Pinto. But they have to get together and make sure that it complies with what the market is looking for. And I'm actually going to ask Todd, if you would, Todd Smith from Hilltop, to come up and talk a little bit about the bond market and how he is going to make sure, as another check, that we do a safe and proper transaction for you, so it never ends up in default. I've done a lot of deals. I've done workouts. I've never had a deal of my own go upside down. So that's 45 years, and I don't want it to happen on this one. So we all work together to make sure it doesn't happen. So Todd, why don't you come up and talk a little?
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Todd Smith with Hilltop Securities as the underwriter for the proposed bond issuance, or series of bond issues that will be planned for the project. Yeah, I mean, as James had mentioned, there'll be adopted policies for issuance, which includes value to lien ratios, making sure that we have sufficient maximum special taxes to cover debt service, et cetera, that type of thing. But, generally speaking, I mean, there's been, I think this year, on average in California, $1 billion to $1.5 billion of community facilities districts bonds that are underwritten and issued to and sold to the public. A transaction such as this, we would likely be marketing primarily to qualified institutional buyers or investors, and not mom and pop retail, especially for startup type projects. Again, just trying to de-risk the investor side of it as well. Yeah, I mean, really, the value to lien ratio is a key component. Understanding what the proposed development is, absorption of the project and build out of the project, which is obviously what investors want to know, because they're going to buy effectively dirt bonds that are being taxed with these special taxes. And what is going to be good for the investor is to see that project actually build out right and get vertical construction value, and which helps secure making sure that folks are going to pay their taxes, right? I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell, but, just try and manage delinquencies, and again, 0 defaults, so we've got a pretty good track record.
All right.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Seeing any?
So in terms of what we're going to ask you to do, which is to study this, get any questions you have to us so we can answer them appropriately. And we would like you to consider adopting a resolution which would formally have CSCDA be the issuer. We're doing this simply to take the administrative burden off of you. In the future, should you decide that you want to form the CFD and you want to be the parties that handle everything, that's something that that can be done in the future. But right now, to get it started, the simplest and best way to do it is to have someone who's done it many, many, many times do it for you at no cost to you. And that's really what we're trying to do. So my understanding, and Mr. Rickelman will have to remind me, I think the 9th of December, we'd like to come back and we'd like to have you approve a resolution. And that resolution would be to have CSCDA serve as your conduit issuer, that's what they call it. And then we would, as the developer, we would put up a deposit so that all of the professionals and all the people who are working are paid. Again, no questions to the county about paying for anything. You don't pay for anything. And then that process would just unfold. We would have 3 resolutions. Brian can tell you all about that. He prepares them. One is to form the district. One is to have a hearing that the district's going to be formed, then to form the district, and then to issue the bonds, which is a separate resolution after all the documentation has been put together. But on the 9th, we're simply going to ask you to let us burden James and then check in with you along the way to make sure everybody's happy and that you're protected. There is a, I don't think we, do we need a Jason? I guess we do. We would need a joint community facilities agreement with every body, every public body that's going to accept some of these improvements. So we would work, say, water district gets this, county gets that, and then enter into an agreement as to who's getting what, and making sure that we are providing all of the things that are needed to have them accepted, just like you would an ordinary public improvement. And there will be goals and policies. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but goals and policies as to what qualifies as a viable CFD. The kinds of standards, 4 times, 3 times, debt value to lien, pardon me, all of that's laid out. So those are the things that we're gonna do, and between now and the next board meeting, we'll circulate these things, and like I said, you'll ask more questions, and hopefully we'll have the answers.
Thank you.
Okay, anything now?
Let me open it to the pub. Did you want to go first, or can I have public comment if there's any? On Zoom? Oh, we do have Lars.
All right, good afternoon, Board. Lars Ewing, Public Services Director and Interim Public Works Director. Appreciate the presentation. Looking forward to getting my laundry list of questions answered. I came with many, and I added to that. So look forward to the meeting that we're going to have immediately following this. I would like to just voice some of those now so that we can ensure that your board is aware of at least what I've identified to begin with. First off, there was reference to the Public Works Director, and maybe that's lowercase Public Works. My point in saying that is we need to ensure that it's not just Public Works, but Public Services. Obviously, I'm in that role, so that's great. But water, wastewater, that's special district. So it's not just inviting the Public Works Director. We need to ensure that we're inviting many different players that would be involved with public infrastructure. There was mention made of roads, drainage, parks, water, wastewater, lighting comes to mind. Lighting districts that may be under special districts may not be. I don't know. A lot of questions there, but we need to bring the right players to the table. Other questions it would be good to get. If we're not reinventing the wheel, it seems like there's, I think it was a number of 47 that has been done. So the implication there is that there is another county or local jurisdictions that have gone through this, and I would like to talk to them. What are they? What are they seeing? What are they going through? So I think that's a request to the group behind me. Also, mention of the public infrastructure when it's built being handed over to the government agency, the government entity. I presume that is the county. There's been a lot of discussion of JPAs and a variety of different entities. So I would like to ensure that who is the entity, the government entity that receives it. Just confirmation there. Also, when the public infrastructure is built, that's one thing. Ongoing maintenance is another. There was reference to that being covered, I think, through administrative costs, or at least the ongoing revenue that's generated through this whole process. But who actually completes that work? Is the money transferred to the government entity, the county? and then the county is responsible to do that maintenance, in which case, who establishes the cost of doing that work? Obviously, there's a cost of doing it privately, there's a cost of doing it publicly, and I want to make sure that that the county, at least on the public works and public services side, is included in that. Also, administrative review. We've talked about the actual construction and maintenance, but prior to that, there's a lot of administrative review, plan reviews, construction inspection, surveyor costs that basically extends beyond the development review that has occurred up to this point that community development has been involved in, and I expect has received payment through development fees. But how does that administrative review, would we be reimbursed? Would county staff, engineering technicians, engineers, surveyors, would they be reimbursed for their time to ensure that the infrastructure does in fact meet county standards on the design side and meet them when they are actually constructed? And then lastly, there was mention of park development. I haven't seen any of the plans for this, so I presume that it would, in fact, meet the requirements that the county has in place for Quimby Park improvement fees, or at least the provision of park facilities to meet the needs of that community. But and it may be that review has gone through my office years ago. I understand this goes back in time, but I would just want to double check that. So that kind of gets a few of the questions out there that I think are worth putting out there for the public and for you as a board. But I do look forward to communicating with through Ben and with the group behind me. So thank you.
Thank you, Lars. All right. I think there's no other public comment, so I'll close it. And Supervisor Sabatier, and then I seen you, Supervisor Owen.
Yeah, just I guess I'll bring it down to two questions. One, there was a talk about you don't have a default in your background, but what is our liability if there is a default on our end, just to at least understand the potential worst case scenario?
So if there's a default in the payment of special taxes, or a default on the bonds is attributable to people not paying their special taxes, whether it's the developer or homeowners and so forth. And so since the county is not the issuer of the debt, it's CSCDA, CSCDA will covenant to existing bond owners that it will pursue foreclosure proceedings against any property that defaults on its special taxes, and eventually there'll be foreclosure sales to try to collect those special taxes. At the end of the day, the bonds that are issued are not a debt or a liability of Lake County. It's an obligation of CSCDA that is payable solely from the special taxes, and that's clearly disclosed to investors and understood in the marketplace.
Okay. And then thank you for that. Just a comment, just to make sure I understand and making it available for the public. One of the goals is to build out this great investment in the Butts Canyon Road area and eventually sell some of those properties to homeowners. Like you said, the homeowners would continue to pay this special tax. I know that there was a vote before. Do they still have the ability to protest when they get there? Is that all done and it's
Done.
It's
Yeah,
finished?
it's done.
I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure on that.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, the bond is obviously so you can get upfront capital, so you can get the work done that you want to get done within the public right away and things like that. I know Director Ewing spoke to it, but it's been on my mind about continued maintenance. That to me seems more like an assessment district than what we've been talking about for a bond. Will there be a continued assessment district, or does this bond have perpetuity so that there will be continuous, what's the timeline in order for us to ensure that we always have this incoming revenue to do the maintenance?
That is a great question. And so that, I think, just to say bluntly, is a business deal for the county and the developer to sort out on the transaction. The bonds will have a term of 30 years. They might be issued in a couple different series over time. There is the ability to levy and collect special taxes for services to pay for maintenance in perpetuity. And so a lot of services CFDs in the state do have that ability to levy special taxes for an extended period of time to pay for road maintenance, storm drain removal, debris removal, all that sort of stuff, and public safety and other aspects of it.
Supervisor,
We talked about that during the approval of the project as
Yeah.
well, so to be continued.
Supervisor Owen?
Yes. Now, my understanding or my thought process was that much of this would be handled much like the Community Service District at Hidden Valley, where you guys would be building your own water systems and sewer systems, but they have to come into our standards. Is that correct? Okay, but you guys will actually be forming your own district to be able to maintain and to all but certain aspects, but a lot of it that's, because you'll have, it'll be gated in many aspects of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, some of it will be private. The private will be paid for with private funds, not with the bond monies. The bond monies must be used, 95% of those dollars must be used for public facilities in order to keep the tax exemption and get the lower interest rate, which gives us the ability to raise more proceeds up front and then draw from that. And there's no risk in terms of the county getting infrastructure that has not been properly inspected.
Sure.
And so there's always that step that the developer builds it and they build it to standards. If it doesn't meet those standards, the county won't accept it, and it will make the developer go back and correct it. I think from the perspective of maintenance taxes, we can structure maintenance taxes into the CFD and allow it to be collected each year to keep whatever we build. My grandfather always told me, Lou, don't buy what you want, buy what you're willing to maintain. And that's kind of where we are. We have to build something that's going to be up to a standard that will allow us to be able to sell to people who see that it's well maintained. When the infrastructure is over, the infrastructure financing portion of the bonds is done, we still have a tax there. And that tax can be collected for maintenance in perpetuity, which is, I think, what your point, Supervisor, was. And so we follow that paradigm here. But we can build, that's why Susan Goodwin is hired, because she is the one who actually puts a very technical formula together, which is recorded, and it has a maintenance portion, it has the developed, undeveloped taxes, the kind of uses, and then how the property is going to be taxed.
Okay, so I think what I was trying to reach for is obviously behind the gates, you guys will be taken care of completely. The portion that is going to be open to the public, are you going to be taxing to maintain that, or are you expecting the county to take over the responsibilities for that?
No, we do
That's
that.
what I was, that was my original thought.
Right. We do everything, and that's really the most important message I can leave you with today, is there's no liability for you. And our job, sports analogy, I'm a guy, probably not PC today, but the quarterback that we're protecting here is really this project, its ability to maintain and build and maintain these improvements, and then create a long-term legacy and allow people to see the value so they want to buy it.
Sure, and that was my original take from it, and I just wanted to clarify.
Great,
Thank you.
great, thank you.
All right. Do we have direction? Is there anything else to add, or Ben?
This is just a workshop, so the recommendation is to reconvene on December 9th to begin the process and adopt the resolution then.
All right, that's what it will be then. That's the direction I think we have. So we'll go from there. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to our next item. Consideration of presentation from Nielsen Merksimer on the 2025 legislative session and potential areas of emphasis for 2026. All right.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here today. Jeff Neal, representing Nielsen Merksimer, representing the county in Sacramento. We've been working with the county for a couple of years now, and I'm here today to present on what happened this year, some of the,
Yeah, you can sit up here if you'd like. You can
I'll
sit
just
up here,
stand,
however
just
you
stand
like.
here. I like to pace around actually when I walk, so I can't, just this mic comes.
After my own
Um,
heart.
I'm a little more comfortable standing, but thank you. Just here to talk about the legislative session, the budget that was passed, the mini budget bills that were part of the budget that passed, some items of significance for Lake County in particular, and then talk a little bit about what we see coming next year in 2026, because there's a lot of unfinished business and a lot of known unknowns, as we like to say. So, first of all, the state passed a balanced budget, as is constitutionally required. There were a number of cuts and deferrals. None, I think that, a lot of this was reported in the summer, I think, where a lot of the interest came in at the end of session. They already had a lot of things to handle. And then, of course, the Governor Newsom decided to make the redistricting an item of urgency. And so there was, when the legislature comes back from summer recess, they have 4 weeks. And that's a real quick 4 weeks because there's a lot to do. All the bills essentially still have to be passed. They always update the budget, like you guys do your quarterly updates. They kind of do an end of session budget update. And then all of the bills still have to pass. Well, the Prop 50 discussion took an entire week where that was the only thing that was really talked about. But on top of that, there were all the things that the legislature already knew they had to try and get done. This was cap and trade reauthorization, allocating funds from the Proposition 4 resources bond that was passed last year by voters, and a couple other items that we'll get into. Both of those, the cap and trade, now cap and invest reauthorization, and Prop 4, as well as the other items, it looked to all of us like that was not going to happen. For cap and trade reauthorization, not the biggest deal. They still have a couple of years before that program expires and they needed to reauthorize it. But on the Prop 4 allocation, it would have been a major misstep, I think a lot of us were considering. There's $10 billion that have been approved by voters. The only cost to the state are the annual interest payments, which have been built into the budget at this point. $10 billion that they can allocate over a number of years, mostly for water projects, also some for not just drinking water, but also natural resource water, flood control, extreme heat, a lot of parks money in there, a lot of fire mitigation and response money. So to have $10 billion available and then to allocate none of it would have been sort of shocking, actually. At the last minute, really past the last minute, they waited until they were a day late, actually, getting all these deals together. But in fact, all of them ended up coming together at like I said, just past the last minute, with one exception that we expect to see some activity on next year. They did actually end up allocating over a third of Proposition 4 from all of the categories of funding. They did end up reauthorizing cap and trade, now called cap and invest. What's in a name? And along with that, they reauthorized and slightly modified the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So the cap and invest program, there's the capping the emissions and requiring industry to buy enough credits to cover their emissions. That's where the revenue comes from. They have quarterly auctions where they buy those credits. Beyond the ones that they're just given. And then the greenhouse gas reduction fund is the invest part of it. So that's where they cap the emissions and then they invest the proceeds. And a lot of this funding goes to a number of programs that are of interest to counties. It is where the money for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program comes from. It gets about, depending on auction revenues, about $800 million a year for planning various types of development, including transit-oriented development. There's some transit money that comes from that. There's some clean air monitoring funding that comes from that. So all of those did come together. They did get passed. Because they were just past the last minute, they actually had to suspend the rules of the House, and they went one day longer than they were supposed to, which all of us who work in the Capitol were very pleased about, very happy to come in on a Saturday when we thought we were going to be all done on Friday. And because of that, actually, the governor had an extra day to sign and veto all the bills because he gets 30 days from whenever their last day of session is. So we got an extra day for all of those things. And so in the middle of all that, of course, there was also the transition from the well, not as of Monday, as of yesterday, no longer the current pro tem, Senator McGuire, but they announced the transition date, which was yesterday, for the new Senate President pro tem, Senator Monique Limon from the Santa Barbara area. So that transition did happen officially as of yesterday. We expect that to result in some changes to the committee assignments, committee chairs, including the important ones, the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee, as well as her leadership team. So we'll be in communication with your staff as that happens. But it'll be really of interest because you get to see where all of the most influential posts are divvied up both geographically, urban versus rural, north versus south. And the list of folks that has been talked about a lot includes a lot of fairly moderate Democrats in her leadership team. We don't know if that's actually the case or if she's settled on that until the announcement comes out, though. So we'll see what happens there. So on the we have we've gone through in our office and compiled all of the Prop 4 allocations that the legislature made in the budget bill. We're sending that to staff, and they're sort of tagged with whether or not those will be more likely to be, based on the way it's budgeted, sort of open grant programs, or whether they're really just allocated to a specific project in one part of the state. One example of that is really that's in two parts of the state, the offshore wind facilities. There's some money for that in the bond. That's not going to happen in an inland area, I'll tell you that. The offshore wind is definitely going to happen off of the Humboldt coast and off of Long Beach, most likely. So, you know, ones like those, not tagged, but a lot of money for water projects, a lot of money for certain types of transportation projects, a lot for park projects, whether that's wilderness, nature parks that people can go to, or whether they're city parks. So as the state departments and agencies that are responsible for those funds prepare those opportunities, hopefully getting the list to county staff ahead of time will allow them to get some lead time on seeing which projects might be appropriate for those funding opportunities. One of the aspects of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that I wanted to bring up, they did alter sort of the priority of funding a little bit. And so they didn't change. There was a lot of talk about how much they would change where the money goes. And mostly they didn't change that for now, although they did build in sort of a review process in the out years to look at how whether the allocation of funds is meeting the climate goals of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program, which is unsurprisingly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But they kept for now mostly the allocation. So there will be $1 billion that goes to the high-speed rail, down from roughly $1.25 billion. There will be $1 billion that goes through the annual budget process, that the governor and the legislature can negotiate for every year to deal with whatever high priority items have come up that year. The SRA fee, if you guys remember that from several years ago, that is now that's been suspended for many years. That funding is getting backfilled from GGRF. That's been true for a while, as well as the advanced transportation and alternative energy manufacturing tax credit that gets paid for out of GGRF. But then there are all of the continuously appropriated programs where the money just goes out. The legislature doesn't have to do it every year. That includes the one I mentioned earlier, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Fund, that gets approximately $800 million. It includes some transit programs that get a few $100 million, a newish one called that has to do with monitoring clean air at the community level. And then the Safer Drinking Water Program, which provides drinking water to very small water systems, usually that just a couple of houses are on, where the wells are found to be undrinkable or often even can't be used for non-potable purposes. So the Safer Drinking Water Program provides drinking water to and helps clean up those wells. All of that funding used to be funded at a certain percent of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, where they were, you know, if they didn't get their full allocation, they at least got something very close to it. These revenues swing from year to year from $3 to $3.5 billion. Usually they're around 4 to 4.5, and then once they got as high as $5 billion. Well, at this point, with the way they've structured it, if the revenues come in below $4.25 billion, which they do about a third of the time, those continuously appropriated programs, including the affordable housing, sustainable communities, safer drinking water, that's where the hit comes from. So the hit is not shared, the insufficient revenue is not shared equally among all the funds. It really goes there first. For any county programs that rely on those funds, should be aware that the funding is a little more volatile at this point. Of course, the hope is that the auction revenues remain healthy now that the program has been reauthorized. People know it's going to be around for the next 15 or 20 years. One of the other major issues for the legislature this year was dealing with AI, automated decision systems, putting some safety guardrails around those. A number of them had to do with the government use of AI and automatic decision systems in particular. These were heavily contested bills. There were many amendments made over the course of the year. And then right at the end of session, almost every single one of them failed to get the votes to get off of either the Senate floor or the Assembly floor. I think this is a bit surprising to people. I'd say one of the overall takeaways from this year in particular was that the moderate Democrats have become a much more forceful caucus to deal with. The last couple of years, they had not been very successful at stopping some of the more progressive elements of their party from passing the priorities that they wanted. This year, the moderate Democrats, partly because of the election in November that changed the makeup of the legislature, and partly, you know, people just reacting to the way the last November election went, they were extremely effective. And so I think one of the things to look for in 2026 is whether that continues to be true or whether this was sort of the high point for the moderate Democratic caucus and their influence ebbs again. But on these AI and ADS bills, that was one area where they were extremely effective because there was a lot of hesitance around about how broad some of these bills were. So some of them, you know, would have, until amendments that came in just the last few days of session as an attempt to try and get it to pass one of the bills, AB 1018, would have stopped public agencies and many private entities from, you know, while it was aiming at AI, it included technologies that everybody has used for years. By my reading of the bill, it would have prevented Excel spreadsheets that project forward into future years. Wouldn't have prevented, would have required significant disclosure that would have been very expensive to comply with. Also, bills having to do with using AI or automated decision systems to inform decisions around employment, either both hiring but also retention or evaluation of workers. That was the one bill that did pass, but the governor vetoed it. So really it was sort of a clean sweep for the opponents on all of those bills. The governor, of course, has been very open to arguments from the tech industry, and these were some of their big bills this year. There are a number of bills related to fire insurance. I know a big issue for most parts of the state, definitely here in Lake County. I would say it was a mixed bag. AB 1 passed. That was one that the county was particularly interested in. Several others got watered down and then passed, having to do with either the state fire marshal influence, or you know how insurers deal with properties after a fire, if they can cancel them right away, or if they, you know, there's a 1 year no cancellation. That's now extended to commercial properties as well, not just residential properties. So that was another one. I think that is one of those issues that we will continue to see. You know, not all has been said that can. So we'll continue to see bills about property safety, about the insurance market, about when insurers can drop policies, when they must insure policies. Obviously, we have the regulations, the new regulatory status at the Department of Insurance as well that continues to be controversial. We'll continue to see bills on housing sufficiency and affordability. A new wrinkle was thrown into that this last week when the federal government SNOFO came out for a lot of these funds that now require, and homelessness is part of this, that require more of the federal money to be spent on temporary shelters, and only a maximum of 30% of certain grant funds can be spent on permanent housing, which is where, frankly, a lot of California cities and counties have been using that money for long-term solutions to homelessness instead of just temporary shelter. You know, that combined with the Proposition 1 funds for behavioral health, these are all, as well as the HAP funding, which has been sort of delayed. All of these are causing counties and cities to a certain extent to reevaluate the mix of their programs and how they can continue to fund the programs that are keeping people sheltered in the short term and the long term. And then water infrastructure will continue to be an issue as well. I think the last thing is just the state budget. It is looking surprisingly good right now, but I think is considered still pretty precarious. So the revenues have come in so far this fiscal year several $1 billion higher than estimates. Most of that money has to go to K through community college education, at least half of it. Another good part will have to go in the state's rainy day fund, which they did use a little bit of this year, so it'll help start building that back up. But right now the state budget's looking quite good. A number of people are predicting the AI stocks to, the word bubble is used a lot. Nobody really knows, but if those stocks right now and the income coming to the people who hold those stocks, many of whom are in the Bay Area, if those stocks start to tumble, the state revenue will immediately look a lot less rosy. So that'll be a major thing going into this coming year, especially as the state legislators start trying to deal with the effects of H.R. 1 and the many health and human service program cuts that will be coming, not just this year, more of them 1 or 2 years out, and a lot of increases to the administration of those programs, new requirements, new work requirements that the county will have to keep track of for a lot of the people who get Medi-Cal, who get CalFresh benefits. So I think that will be the major budget item, is how the state will respond to that, and how many of those costs, the new costs of administration, but also the cost to try and backfill a lot of those services that the federal government is pulling back from funding, how much of that the state can afford to do, and how much of that cost they will push down to counties. So it'll be an area where we are extremely active, I think not just this coming year, but for the next couple of years. So that was, I think, in a, I don't know if it was a nutshell or 2 or 3 or 4 nutshells, but that was a lot of what happened this year. Happy to answer any specific questions that any of you have.
Go ahead, Supervisor
Yeah,
Presley.
thanks for that, Jeff. Do you want to touch on the proposed increases to the FAIR Plan and what that looks like? Particularly, we have some of the higher zip codes in District 5 and District 3 have the highest.
Yeah, and a lot of these are, both the result of the LA fires, of course, where it wasn't just a lot of properties, but a lot of extremely high value properties in Malibu and in the Pasadena area. I mentioned AB1. There was also the effort to allow the FAIR Plan to use the iBank to kind of raise funding in order to avoid liquidation, I guess, or funding insufficiency. It's also related, as you know, Supervisor Pyska, to the new regulations that allow the catastrophic modeling that will increase prices, but require, hopefully, if it works as planned, the insurers that use the catastrophic modeling to insure more homeowners in higher fire risk areas of the state. You know, I think this was when they were rolling out, when the commissioner and the governor, to a certain extent, were rolling out a lot of these proposals. One of the phrases that did not pass their lips very often, if ever, was affordability. Right? They're talking about making sure insurers try to get them to stay in the state or come back to the state. They're talking about helping make sure people get insurance. But I think there was recognition on their part that it was going to be difficult at best to pair that with keeping rates affordable. And so I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of those costs, not just of the disasters that have already occurred, but now of the ones being projected in the future, being priced into the cost of insurance.
So what do you think the likelihood of these increases going through is?
If I could use the AI or the predictive modeling of the automated decision systems, I mean, I think it'll be difficult to avoid. And so I think the size of them is a question, or how broadly they can be spread, right, among all of California's insured. If they're more localized, then they're higher. If they're spread among more policyholders, right, the increases can be lower because they'll be helped by properties in less fire-prone areas. So that might be part of the conversation, but I think that's been, from the conversations that I've heard and been a part of, that's sort of been the toughest part of the puzzle to crack, is how to try and keep those costs affordable. And I mean, it seems like that has not been the highest priority for the decision makers in Sacramento.
Yeah, so, and just so you know, you probably have looked at it, but in our zip codes in the county, it's between mid 30% to mid 40% increase.
Yeah, well, if we can work with you to reach out to the department, if we can help facilitate some conversations with them, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, and we're happy to provide any type of case study or story or anything to illustrate that hardship that is going to hit our residents, which they're already having difficulty making the premiums that they have now. So each year we're seeing a 40% increase on Fair Plan, and then this is going to be a significant increase on those that are already on.
Yeah, we have family that live in Tuolumne County, and they've had the same complaint. Just really shocked at how much their costs have gone up in just the last year or two.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Yeah, my questions or my comments are not necessarily about what happened, but just what we're doing to position ourselves. The Hospital Health Transformation Program from HR 1 provided something like $50 billion, I think, over the next 10 years, 5 years. We're getting $100 million a year in the state of California because every state gets the same amount. When you divide that, that's about 1.7 million, but we know we're not going to get an equal share. We're going to get our equitable share, which is going to be much less. We've already had some cancellations of some pretty major projects here from our healthcare providers, and they're also, every single one, including the surrounding counties, are on the list of potential failing because of the changes through HR 1. What is the state doing to make sure, because I'm worried their application might be denied. You just don't know. But is there any conversation happening in the background of what else can be done to help support rural hospitals? Because that's what it was all about, was to help support rural hospitals and the impact it would have.
That's definitely been something that's been coming up. And of course, there was the hospital closure of a couple of counties south of here just recently because of they found a route that made it, just under the distance required. The rural hospital issue has come up. I think, we will need to do a lot of work to keep it higher on the priority list because the number of health issues got very, very long very quickly. The MCO tax, the Managed Care Organization tax that we just sort of passed a change to last November, the voters in Prop 35, that is now essentially no longer allowed the way ours is structured under federal law. Things like that, things like the same dollar amount per state. Clearly things that seem designed to target California in particular. The way the error rate for, not to go off topic, but the way the error rate for human services was designed, it was specifically targeted at California. You know, the punishment or the penalties go up until you get right to where California is, and then right after us, they decline again, right, for states with different error rates. So we have the end of the MCO tax, which is several $1 billion a year. We have, you know, the change to the premiums. We have a number of people becoming ineligible for Medi-Cal, different communities. All of those will have, will be fighting along with the rural hospital issue for funding. I think the received wisdom, I think is understood by everybody. There isn't enough money available in the state budget or that could be freed up to backfill all of those. So, you know, where the governor and the legislature prioritize those issues will be important, and that's why I think while it is definitely one of the items on the list of things that are of great concern, it is something that we'll need to put a lot of energy into making sure it's high enough on the list that it gets the funding it needs.
Thank you.
All right. There's not anything else that I opened up to the public already? Nope, I'll open it up for public comment. All right, I'll close public comment. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Supervisor.
And, we'll see where we go from here.
And hopefully I'll see some of you in a couple of weeks down in Santa Clara County.
Yeah, thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
See you then.
Thank you.
All right. 6.11, consideration of adoption of addendum to the initial study mitigated negative declaration for the South Main Street and Soda Bay Road widening and bike lanes project. I have Public Works and Community Development coming up.
Good afternoon. Lars Ewing, Interim Public Works Director. I believe that's on. We're doing a joint presentation here today. My role is to give a little bit of a background on the South Main Street Soda Bay Road project. But what is up for consideration is approval of an addendum to a previously approved CEQA document. Michelle here has worked very hard on this. I appreciate her work and others in CDD. So she can certainly speak much more intelligently and eloquently about the process that she has gone through, along with others. But I thought it would be helpful just to set the stage and give some background on the South Main Street Soda Bay Road project. To be quite honest, I think we recently did give a little bit of an update when there was an addendum to the design contract. So this may be, you may be aware of it, but I think it is helpful for the purposes of this, of what is being considered here for CEQA. So I'm going to start with, first off, the South Main Street Soda Bay Road. I'm calling it the Soda Bay Road Corridor Improvement Project. It's a roadway widening and improvement project, as well as an undergrounding of overhead utilities or dry utilities for an overall improvement. It goes from the city limits of South Main Street on the southern end of Lakeport through the intersection at 175 onto Soda Bay Road, and then it goes around the bend towards the Lakeport Transfer Station and Manning Creek. It ends short of Manning Creek, but right around the transfer station. So that's the limits of the project that were evaluated for CEQA, as well as what has been underway for design, right-of-way, and permits. So I think it's important maybe just to set the stage for a few categories. One is the original environmental review. The project, first off, goes back to early 2000s, if not before. There's an agenda item later today to amend the original utility undergrounding district that was established in 2001. So it does at least go back to that date because it was envisioned, the utility undergrounding was envisioned to be done in concert with a road improvement project. But the environmental review, to focus on one category, the original environmental review began in about 2007 and then completed, at least completed as a milestone of the CEQA document being approved and the NEPA document that was a joint document in 2012. And then in 2013, the general plan conformity finding by the Lake County Planning Commission. So I did mention earlier that it is a joint document, NEPA and CEQA. The project has a variety of funding sources, a portion of which is federal, and so that it required NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, to be completed. And I think it's important to note that there was a similar, or at least an analogous, revalidation of the NEPA document done back in June by Caltrans. So the analogous step has been done by Caltrans as the lead agency for NEPA. There has been significant cultural and environmental efforts, both pre-construction and during construction. When we get there, just examples, it includes a historic properties treatment plan and an MOU with Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians. So the environmental review was done. We'll come back to that because that's really what we're addressing here. But a few other things to highlight: regulatory reviews and permits by those regulatory agencies. We have three main permits that are secured, two of which have been secured. The other is literally in the mail, and we will receive it in a few days. We have the Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit for the Clean Water Act and the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board 401 permit. So those are in hand, and the what is in the checks in the mail is the California Department of Fish and Wildlife 1600 stream bed alteration agreement. So permits are complete. Next step is design. Design is 99% complete. We're just a few days out from that being what would deem to be construction ready. Right-of-way acquisitions. We have about nearly 50 acquisitions completed over a number of years. That includes both permanent right-of-way as well as temporary construction easements. We do have 3 properties that remain, and we're in direct communication with them, and it looks like the path is going to be complete in order to meet the deadline that we have, which I'll come to later. A few other things that are going on. Utility coordination. There are existing utilities above and beyond the overhead utilities. We have to coordinate, as you can imagine, with the utility owners in the road to ensure that they're on board with the project, and that has been complete. For example, with Lake County Special Districts for their infrastructure in the road. And then the last, as far as completed work or main category, is the coordination with the overhead utility companies, PG&E, AT&T, and MediaCom. So that has been underway, and we have what's called a joint trench agreement with the county as the lead agency for that. So that's underway. Today's action, the CEQA addendum. The reason for an addendum to CEQA is that the original initial study and mitigated negative declaration did not evaluate nighttime construction. Just to ensure that we preserve all the options and attempt to minimize any disruptions, or minimize disruptions to the public and to business owners and residences along that corridor, we felt it was important to provide for that allowance. So the CEQA addendum includes, that is included in your board's packet. It does include an exhibit that thoroughly evaluated that nighttime construction, and it did conclude that there are no new significant environmental effects, and that's the same documentation that was reviewed by Caltrans when they did a NEPA revalidation. So that is helpful, I think, for your board to be aware of. A few key milestones coming up. Funding, I mentioned everything that I mentioned before. We need to get to completion so that we can access construction funding. All the pre-construction work needs to be certified. Environmental documents, regulatory permits, design completion, right-of-way securance, and utility coordination needs to be certified in order to access about $10.5 million that is in STIP funding funding at the CTC, the California Transportation Commission. So the January 2026 meeting is our deadline to have the CTC allocate the funding. There are, just like your board meetings, there's we have to back up from there in order to get it agenda ready. So our deadline is December 1st to have everything submitted in to access that the 10.5 million, or better stated would be for the CTC to consider allocation of the construction funding. The construction funding of $10.5 million is not the entire, it will not fund the entire corridor. We're looking at phasing the project. The 10.5 million is anticipated to fund South Main Street and a portion of Soto Bay Road. That's just for the road funding. The undergrounding of overhead utilities is in a similar boat. Rural 20A funding through PG&E is available, as well as AT&T and Mediacom funds that they bring to the table. But the funding available looks like it'll fund essentially to that same those same project limits from South Main Street, all of South Main Street, and then onto a portion of Soto Bay Road. So the intent is to if we get the construction funding, we would go to construction for the undergrounding of overhead utilities around mid-2026, with the road construction to follow likely in 2027. It's important to note that coordination with the city of Lakeport is ongoing for the placement of water line in the corridor, at least in the South Main portion and Soto Bay Road, so that we're not tearing up the road at a later date. I think the phase 2 is entirely dependent upon funding. There's no source of funding right now identified for that. So we would have basically a shovel-ready project, and it would provide us an opportunity to apply for future funding. So that was maybe a little bit of a belabored summary, but it goes back a while, and it requires I think your board's awareness to consider this CEQA addendum. So hand it over to Michelle to talk about anything on the CEQA specific portion.
Thank you, Lars. Good afternoon, board. Michelle Ayers, Senior Planner, excuse me, the Community Development Department. As Lars noted, a addendum to an initial study has been prepared in accordance with CEQA section 15162 through 15164. And really, the key component to being able to prepare an addendum is upon analyzation of, I don't know if that's actually a word, upon completion of analyzing the modified project, as Lars noted, is adding a couple hours to the construction period, that the modified project would not have an increase in substantial significant effects that were not previously identified, and that the minimization and mitigation measures have been swapped out or strengthened, if you will. And the last thing that occurred through the addendum is that all of the regulatory sections were updated as needed. For example, vehicle miles traveled is the way that we analyze traffic under CEQA now versus LOS, which was level of significance. Added a section for AB 52 tribal consultation, and those are just some examples. The biological section was updated. They did a section 7 consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So essentially all of the documents and the regulatory components were updated as necessary. And the addendum found that there are no new substantive impacts, and so it can be supported by staff. Happy to answer any other questions you may have. Last thing I'll note is that all of the original mitigation measures and requirements of the 2012 document are also still incorporated and valid and will be implemented for the project.
I'll open it up for public comment. No hands in Zoom. I'll close public comment. And with that,
Anything further? Mr. Chair, I'll move to adopt the addendum identified in Exhibit A to initial study with mitigated negative declaration for the South Main Street and Soto Bay Road widening and bike lanes project as modified based on the findings in the board memo dated November 18th, 2025.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Six point 1.2, consideration of an ordinance amending Article 6 of Chapter 18 Lake County Code to include enforcement measures and associated due process requirements for cannabis cultivation-related taxes. Treasurer Tax Collector Pat Sullivan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today. I'm Patrick Sullivan, Treasurer Tax Collector. I'm here with Liz Martinez, the Assistant Treasurer Tax Collector. So we're here today to present the revised cannabis tax ordinance for the cultivation tax. I know I've previously advised your board that our office is working on this, and it has taken a while to get here, but I think what we have should meet everyone's needs. What I want to highlight is that most of this is additional language. Everything in Section 2 is an addition to the current ordinance, and the general premise of this is that we're asking for the same authority that exists for transient occupancy tax currently in the county. So you're going to see a lot of the same language, and there's some overlapping language to try to get it consistent with the cannabis business tax ordinance. And so those are the two pieces. This is the same type of authority that we have for both occupancy tax and unsecured property taxes. So you'll see the ability to place liens, levy bank accounts, garnish wages. These are some of the typical actions that county tax collectors use to collect these types of taxes. I would also note that this is the same language that other counties with the cannabis cultivation tax has. So this is sort of proven mechanisms that have served other counties well in this capacity. The only other substantive change outside of these additional code sections for the collections and enforcement efforts are an adjustment with the definition of legally authorized cannabis cultivation. I'm sorry, for some reason the track changes didn't come through on this, but in the first section, we do clarify that Prop 64 passed after this measure. So when Measure C was written, we did not yet know what regulatory mechanisms would exist, whether it would be local permitting, state licensing, some combination of them, how many agencies might be involved, and whether California would legalize cannabis cultivation in general or only in specific circumstances. So our ordinance now, just this language change, it includes medical cannabis cultivation, commercial and recreational cannabis cultivation, so that we're not stuck trying to distinguish any types here. Essentially, our office's goal is that we want to tax the activity of cannabis cultivation and not get bogged down in some of these other definitions, because we have previously had issues where people are saying they lacked a particular fish and wildlife permit or some other permit that was then altering the amount of the tax. And really, we want to focus on the activity, that if you're cultivating cannabis, you should be receiving a tax bill. And utilizing the permitting data from CDD would just be another resource that we have. It would certainly be our primary resource, but it would not be the exclusive resource in determining the tax bill. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Yeah, I spoke with County Council and looking at Section 18-60.2, and Mr. Sullivan, you and I had a deep conversation about that one as well. It almost, because of the clarification, I worry that it makes it appear, and it might just be a perception, it may not be the reality, of tightening a loophole that allows us to collect a tax that we weren't collecting before, which may end up resulting in looking like we're expanding the scope of the cannabis cultivation tax, which is not allowed within the ability for us to amend to expand the scope. We can decrease the scope, we can do the opposite, but we can't expand it. So I know I had a conversation with County Council. I'll let him speak his words rather than paraphrase for him, but it's still a concern for me. And also the continued use of cannabis business throughout the rest of the document in the new section. I understand that your statement to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that this is kind of a normal use of the word, and that you'd rather the concept or the wording of cannabis business not be changed, but maybe we can add something, actively cultivating or with a cultivation permit, because it makes it confusing when it's within the cannabis cultivation tax, when right below that there's a cannabis business tax of a whole section of the code. And so really want to be able to separate those things, and want to allow both Mr. Guintavano and Mr. Sullivan to at least respond to my concerns. Everything else is great.
Do you want?
Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, I can go first on that. So as far as apportionment goes, to that point, this is a complicated issue. We actually haven't had the situation arise here yet where we've had to deal with an apportionment. But to give an example of how it could theoretically happen, right now the state does allow micro businesses. So you can have a state license that allows you to cultivate cannabis and do two other activities, maybe manufacturing and distribution, or distribution and retail sales. As it's written right now, because our ordinances are separate, the cultivation tax ordinance, we would look at the square footage that business is cultivating. So if it's a small farm that, let's say, distributes and does sales, so they manufacture, or I'm sorry, they keep half of their product, half of the cannabis they've cultivated in-house, and they sell it directly. The other half, they sell to a distributor somewhere else. Right now, under the cultivation tax ordinance, we would tax their entire square footage. But under the business tax ordinance, it's a gross receipts tax. We tax the gross receipts of that cannabis business, which includes the cultivation. So all that money they make from selling the product under that they have grown becomes gross receipts subject to that tax. So we would collect the tax on the business tax side, but we would also collect the tax on the cultivation tax side. I don't know that that was the intent of the voters. That means that if you were to run a micro business with cultivation, you're taxed under a gross receipts model and a square footage model, which I guess I see right now. The example that comes to mind is one where you'd end up taxed more without this language. But to Supervisor Sabatier's point, we haven't seen all the different incarnations of these business types and what happens if they're allowed to straddle jurisdictions or anything. I can also imagine a scenario that Supervisor Sabatier is raising where somehow, even though we haven't encountered it yet, it could be the opposite, that maybe there is a way this results in an increased tax. Like I said, I can't think of a scenario right now. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be one. I don't know if we want to break this issue down, if you want to go next, Lloyd.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
Well, just for your board's reference, you have Lake County Code Section 18-56.2, 18-56.2 of the cannabis cultivation tax, which addresses the ability to modify, repeal, or amend the cannabis cultivation tax ordinance, right? And it states that Lake County Board of Supervisors may repeal this chapter, that's the ordinance, or amend it in a manner which does not result in an increase in the amount of the tax or broaden the scope of the tax imposed herein without further voter approval. So that's the crux of the issue here, with references in what is cited as the proposed section section 18-60.2, the apportionment provision. That provision makes reference to a person operating under the cannabis cultivation tax ordinance, and it references the intent of the county to apply the commercial cannabis business tax, which references a different set of code sections. So there may be a way, so the argument there potentially is that one might construe that language to somehow, that language may be construed to be broadening the scope of what is intended to be the cannabis cultivation tax in certain situations. But there may be a way to maybe tweak that language or revise that language so that it is made clear that it only contemplates a narrow set of circumstances, for instance, or that so that the intent is not to So that whatever the application of this 18-60.2 apportionment provision, that it would be subject to 18-54, where any, if there's any, if it's applied in a way where it would increase the amount of the tax or the scope of the tax, that wouldn't be allowed, because that has to go through voter approval under 18-56.2.
Then, I mean, perhaps that adding a sentence at the end, just to be clear, this language exists already in the cannabis business tax ordinance, so this was going to be the mirror, because the business tax side contemplated this. We didn't know about these possibilities, I think, or at least it appeared no one contemplated them with the cultivation tax ordinance. But if there's a concern, we could add a line to this that would say this section is not intended to increase the scope of the tax or would not result in a tax greater than that imposed under one of these individually. I'm not sure what to do. I did clarify, we do have a micro business pending. So right now, when that business comes into effect, our office will be taxing them fully under both, unless there's some kind of language here. So that business would get taxed at a higher rate than all other farms.
Double tax.
Hmm?
A double tax.
It would essentially be double.
Go ahead, Supervisor Spati.
And I, as usual, will probably complicate it, but I think the state can provide a micro business license, and we can provide a cultivation license underneath the state's license, and also distribution and sale or dispensary, whatever it is that's under the micro business. So then we're only taxing based on what our tax code has stated, rather than because micro business is very specific in the business tax that we tax the micro business. If you have if we're saying we're going to split the micro business without actually splitting it within our cultivation code or within our micro business code, then it almost feels like we're utilizing a tax that was passed under the business tax and now moving it over into this, which I think expands the scope of, and that's where I get concerned. I think there's other ways to get to where, and I appreciate the concept and the issues and the potentials of what could happen, but I think there's a different way to get to the same place to make sure we don't overtax and we also don't miss out on the tax. But I don't know that doing it like this without further defining and specifications, that it might go against what the ability that the Board of Supervisors was given by the voters to make amendments. I don't think we meet that concept.
So I think the only alternative I'm aware of that exists without adding this language on the cultivation tax side would be to do it as a promulgation of administrative procedures under the cannabis business tax, where it was formerly the tax administrator, but now that's been deferred to the treasurer tax collector as that position. That position may promulgate administrative procedures for apportionment as he or she finds not useful or necessary. So our office could promulgate procedures under the business tax to address this. It would create the same end result. But if that's preferable to amending the cultivation tax ordinance, that is a way to do it with the existing language.
All right.
I'd be good with that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could strike the apportionment section then from this ordinance.
I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Good afternoon, supervisors and staff. Margot Kambara. Let me see. Sorry, I have to find my place here. Oh, God. Oh, here we go. Lake Cap, a local grassroots nonprofit organization, wishes to comment on your agenda item that you are considering now. Lake Cap supports the county treasurer tax collector's efforts to improve collection of cannabis taxes. Adding the proposed enforcement measures to the treasurer tax collector's toolbox can increase the effectiveness of the county's cannabis tax collection. Currently, there are several cannabis tax collection tasks that are labor intensive. There are many challenges surrounding the collection of the county's cannabis tax. The proposed ordinance and changes to Chapter 18, Article 6 of the County Code are a step to improving the county's cannabis tax collection. By approving the proposed ordinance and changes to Chapter 18, your board continues your commitment to good management. Lake Cap encourages this effort. On a related subject, Lake Cap shares your board's interest in getting a better understanding of county cannabis tax and fee revenue and funds. Lake Cap looks forward to the financial analysis of the county's cannabis program that your board expressed interest in this year during your budget meetings. And during the course of your discussion now, I know the focus has shifted. It's not so much of approving an ordinance, but expanding scope of the tax. So this comment that I read was sent to your board, I believe yesterday or earlier, a few days ago. So it's not quite germane to the current tenor of your conversation, but we just wanted to express appreciation for the treasurer tax collector's efforts to serve our county. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other comments, I'll close public comment, and I don't know if you wanted to go first, or Pat, did you want to?
Well, there was a second portion, the Supervisor Sabatier's questions.
Oh,
thank you.
Is that what you were going to say too?
Yeah, I just wanted to get Mr. Guintavano's take on when it says when a person discontinues engaging in a business, when there's the business tax and there's the cultivation tax. I know we talked about maybe saying under this article or something along those lines, but it's mentioned 4 times. And I just want to make sure that if it's understood that business means the applicant that is doing cultivation, that's fine, but business is not defined. Under the business tax, business is defined. We can't use a different article's definition within this article. So I just wanted to at least get an answer to those questions, because there seem to be some agreements that might be something we can tweak or fix.
Okay. Yeah, I'm certainly open to changing that if you thought there was clarifying language like taxable activity or cultivation or some other word we can add.
Well, one possible option for your board's consideration, and also looking at Treasurer Tax Collector Sullivan here, is, Article 7, Chapter 18 of the Lake County Code, that's the Cannabis Business Tax Ordinance, does define business. So defines business as, that's under Section 18-64A. It's broadly defined to include all activities engaged in or caused to be engaged in within the unincorporated area of the county, including any commercial and industrial enterprise. It goes on. Right. So one possible option for your board, if Treasurer Tax Collector Sullivan is open to this, is to just utilize that same definition and place that definition, add that as utilize that definition under 18-64A under the Cannabis Business Tax Ordinance, and use that same definition as the definition of a business, because it's not defined in Article 6 of Chapter 18. You include that as one of the definitions for business, so that any references to business made in the Cannabis Cultivation Tax Ordinance will then be defined as such. And it would make it consistent with same use of the term between the 2 articles.
I would agree with that recommendation. I think that would be helpful, but I'm not sure that completely clarifies the question that gets raised in terms of what activity is being regulated. So do you think it would make sense to add, taxable activity or something, or cultivation as defined in this article? Because cultivation includes planting, seeding, germinating. Do you think it would be helpful to add both? To clarify that business, add that definition from the business tax ordinance, but also say business, including cultivation?
Yes, so, yes. So the definition for business under the Cannabis Cultivation Tax Ordinance, that's Article 6, can be phrased or framed as business shall include all activities, including cultivation, and that's already defined there in the cannabis cultivation tax ordinance, engaged in or caused to be engaged in within the unincorporated area of the county, and then it goes on, and then just use the same language.
All right. Looks like we're on the same page, and I think we just need to offer the ordinance, right?
And it would be, thank you, Mr. Chair, so it would be two motions. If your board wishes, I could walk it.
Let's walk
For your
that.
board's consideration, the first motion would be a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance as amended to be read in title only, and that would incorporate the amendments that were discussed and approved by your board in discussing this item. So that would be the first motion.
So moved. And that would mean getting rid of the apportionment and adding the definition.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Go ahead, Joanna.
An ordinance amending Article 6 of Chapter 18, Lake County Code, to include enforcement measures and associated due process requirements for cannabis cultivation-related taxes.
And then the second motion would be to approve the draft ordinance as amendment, that the draft ordinance as amended be advanced to the next Board of Supervisors meeting for consideration and possible adoption. And that date would be December 9, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're going to take a short break before we go on to our next one, and we'll see you back here at about 2:58. I know, 3, but trying.
Are we going into close?
No, we have to wait, right?
He's going to be a little late, but that gives us time to
guide people when it's your item? So what do you want to talk about?
That is awesome.
All right,
I like you.
we're back. Hey, we're back at 2:58 too.
Oh, my word. I needed some chocolate.
So, all right, we're back at 2:59 actually, so we're in a good shape. We'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is 6.13, consideration of an ordinance amending Article 8 of Chapter 18 of the Lake County Code to implement a low-value property tax exemption. Treasurer, tax collector, auditor, controller, and county clerk and assessor are here to present. Go ahead.
All right, I'll lead off. Patrick Sullivan, Treasurer Tax Collector. This is the proposed low-value ordinance. There was a previous board item where this was raised with your board that we would be returning with it. All three of our offices have coordinated on this effort. This ordinance is essentially the same type of ordinance you'll see in the other counties. I believe there's still 7 counties that don't have one at this time. But same kind of language. Our proposed ordinance is restricted to real property, secured property tax. Other counties include the unsecured role. There's more on here. But at this point, ours is limited to real property that's worth $5,000 or less. I included some of the stats that you had previously seen about how these properties represent over 22% of our inventory. It's, I think, approximately 13,500 parcels. So it's an enormous amount of work. And I think the primary driver, all three of our offices are impacted in different ways, but it's the delinquencies. It's the cost associated with the delinquencies and the fact that these types of parcels have a much higher delinquency rate. It's approximately 5 times or 6 times higher than the rest of the county. So that's the real driver here. We're basically spending more actual dollars than it's worth to try to collect these fees. These bills are small, and given their nature, I mean, we can be issuing bills that have, $16, let's say, of a base tax. Then there's fire district fees that are another $50 on that. But we are able to address the fire districts separately. And I don't know, I can pass it off to the auditor controller to speak on that if you'd like, or, yeah.
There you go.
Regarding the direct charges, we worked with Megabyte, the tax collection system, and the fire districts, and we found a way to allow the fire districts to continue to put their direct charges on $0 bills. And then we have a mechanism to where, because this type of bill wouldn't be eligible for the normal process where a lien would be put on. So we'll handle them separately so they don't go through that process, but it still allows the fire department an opportunity to put the direct charges on, try to get the collections, and then if the bill doesn't get paid, the fire department can then go and recover the money separately. They don't now have to be in line with all the other items on a tax bill and wait 5 years. It gives them a lot more flexibility. And after looking at it a little more closely, it also seems that currently there are some bills where we, as a process, don't allow direct charges to be put on. And by making this change, it will give them opportunity to put charges on more bills than they're doing now. So all in all, it seems like we have a plan to address the direct charges for the fire districts.
And I would just add that we've spoken with all the fire districts. We've had meetings with them, and we've let them know that this option exists, and to contact our offices if they want to proceed with us helping them with their billing, that they would need to let us know. Or some of them have looked at billing on their own anyways over the last few years. If any of them want to go that route, we can accommodate that as well. Just as long as they're in touch with us, we can make either way work.
And the conversations we've had thus far, the fire departments seem really open to this process. It's they can continue doing what they know, and again, it gives them more flexibility for their collections.
Do you have anything to add, Rich?
What I'll add is, so for this process, it's not a substantial amount of savings on hours for the assessor's office. But we do get impacted, as you've heard in the past, by the delinquencies. Choking there for a second. Delinquencies. Yeah, I don't need the delinquencies, because we have to do the legal descriptions for the properties. So, like in the past, when the boards ask for more sales to be done, that impacts our office, as we've said multiple times in the past. So if this is going to help that, that would be the biggest gain for us, hours-wise. I do think it is a big benefit for the taxpayers. Like Patrick mentioned, you've got very low bills. We're chasing them down through phone calls in some cases. All three of us are impacted by phone calls, no matter which one is the person that needs to actually work it. And it's good that we set it up so there's secured and unsecured. Secured is going to be anything that you could put a lien against a property, right? And that's what we focused on. The unsecured is going to be a lot of our smalls, kind of like think about boats. That's going to be the unsecured, and that's why we took it off, to make sure we weren't impacting boats. We have a lot of boats in our lake. We have a lake, where one of the biggest guys has boats on the property roll. And so that's why we made that decision on unsecured versus secured. And that's pretty much what we'll say on my side.
All right. Anything to close on or anything else to add?
Just that there would be significant staff savings across all the offices, as Mr. Ford pointed out. Once you get to the delinquency stage, all three of these offices are pretty severely impacted. We don't have staff dedicated to this, so we are pulling them from their other duties, which really costs us pretty dearly. It can be an enormous amount of staff time. And I can say for my office, unfortunately, a lot of the deadlines with the property tax system line up with the payment deadlines. So often we're working on the tax sale at our busiest times of year. So it's demanding. This gets us back to a workload that's actually still higher than normal compared to other counties. We still have per cap more of these types of sales, even if this ordinance goes through, but it brings it to a far more manageable level. So that's our pitch.
All right. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I know we talked yesterday about this. Is there an estimated number of what, say, if we weren't to go forward on this, or what's the impact number-wise in dollar amounts to the county to deal with these without having a low-value ordinance?
So if right now, if you look at the most recent set of data we have, the 1% base tax that's charged to these type of bills for properties under $5,000 would bring in $246,000. That's at least what we bill out. We really only collect about 160 because the delinquency rates are so high. So that would represent a loss of about 160,000 in a given year. But that's split across all the different districts, other public agencies. And what I would point out is that when we did the math on a recent sale we were looking at having to do if this were not to pass, of 1,000 properties, we did calculate out what the cost would be. And I can kick that over to Ms. Martinez.
All right, Liz.
So doing the calculations, if we had to do a sale again of 1,000 parcels, we're looking at approximately $425,000 that we probably would not recuperate. We're not going to get any of that back because everything is a deficit, because these properties have no value. We've offered them before, and so the likelihood of us recouping any of that money is minimal.
Thank you.
And we're talking, and we would have to have probably a sale every year of 1,000 for probably the next decade. So that's $425,000 per year.
Thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier was next, Supervisor Pyska, then Supervisor Owen.
So I guess I'll first off say that I think there's a mistake in the ordinance in section 18-92B1. I don't think you mean subsections B3 through B5 because there is no B5, and I would suspect you mean 1 through 4 maybe? And it's weird because there's 2 ones, so I'm not quite, or maybe it is supposed to be 3 through 5 and it's not counting correctly because there's a paragraph in between when you go to the next page. I just don't know where B3 and B through B5 is.
I apologize for that. I think that's because originally we were looking at including unsecured, and so those sections were altered.
So just in case we move forward, I just wanted to mention that. I don't know what needs to be done to that.
I believe it's a reference to 1 through 4.
And would that be subsection of 1893, 1 through 4?
Yes.
Okay. Rather than what appears to be 18-92. So my comment here is I understand the reason, and I'm not going to argue that there's probably savings of dollars internally in the Lake County agency by not having to deal with these properties. And your decade is a dream because this is perpetual. These properties will always be a problem if we don't solve the problem. But this is, to me, a very downstream solution, not a very upstream solution. I know that some of my colleagues have been working on a solution for the paper parcels, and sorry, maybe I'm not supposed to use the term paper parcels, but I think that we all know what I'm talking about. But I know some of my colleagues have been working on something, and I feel like this is putting the cart before the bull. We need to have a solution about what to do with these, because at least from my perspective, I'm here to serve the people that got me here, and this does not solve their problem in their communities by no longer taxing these. 70% of the people are paying their taxes on it. 30% are defaulted, at least in the areas that I've looked at. It might depend on which area. And you made the statement that these low values are throughout all the districts. They're much heavier in specific districts than others. The 5,000. And yes, I hear that. District 3 is definitely one that's highlighted in my mind. So my personal opinion is that we need to take action. This is what I said last time. We need to start with an MOU between the city of Clear Lake and the county. As soon as anything is tax defaulted, we need to do a Chapter 8 sale. We need to have an MOU, or maybe not an MOU, but with the county. As soon as there's a tax defaulted, we need to do a Chapter 8 direct sale to the county. We are not going to solve this waiting for individual private property owners to do something with these properties. They have to be accumulated, and the only way we're going to accumulate them is if we work with the local governments in which their jurisdiction is, and open that up to tribes as well. And so I don't see this as the solution. I see this as swiping something under the rug and telling those communities that are going to be impacted by these properties to keep waiting another 100 years, just like we have, unfortunately, because we just haven't done the solution. I know it comes with liabilities, but we also know the liabilities already exist. Fires, illegal dumping, all the things we don't want that surround our communities are happening there. And so I'm asking for postponement to have this conversation, where I don't mind doing this if we already have a solution in place. And maybe we don't even need to do this if we have a solution in place. But this is not a solution. This is a swiping it under the rug. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Did you put Supervisor Owen?
Actually, I believe that Supervisor Sabatier just articulated what I was going to say much better than I would have articulated it. What I was looking for was a solution. So what is going to be the end result? What can we do to resolve this? So he's already stated it. So thank you.
All right, I'll open it up for, did you have something to add? It looked like you did, so go ahead.
Yeah, the only question I would have with that is I know, in fact, me and Bruno were on a committee years ago talking about the same thing. This has been going on a while. I will tell you the risk in my office from the, legal definition descriptions that we have to put on every time they do a sale that's of 1,000 items. We have one person left that can do that in my office. The other person just retired. So we're getting to the point where that's getting pretty thin, as it does in cycles in all the offices. We've rebuilt a lot of my office, but we're getting to another cycle of people starting to retire. And so some of those skills aren't there. So we're going to get to a point where some of the things, as we've talked about in the past, some of the things that are being asked of the treasurer, we can't accomplish without some additional resources, some additional space also, because we can't even fit more people in our space. Some additional things if we want to continue on this path. And I agree with Bruno, at some point this needs to be fixed. But we've been talking about it for a while. Me and Bruno were on it together years ago under Carol, and we had some great ideas. But we also heard some challenges on some of the ideas we put forth, and I'm open to anything you guys want to do. But I do think we got to move on it kind of quick because the timing is kind of catching up with a couple of us. And that's pretty much why we're here.
And I know Genevieve had something too, so I'll get back to you after. You said you wanted to respond as well, so.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I just wanted to point out that I do believe that the low value ordinance is going to solve one problem, not all of the problems. It couldn't possibly, the subdivision issue. There's a lot of things out there that need to be solved that may take a while. But the low value ordinance is specifically to stop us from losing money. Just to remind you that even the 70% that do pay, we lose money even on that bill. So the county gets 1% of the value. So we're going to get about 50 cents on a bill that goes out. We're going to send out the bill, pay for all the ink and the envelope. We're going to collect it. We're going to calculate it, apportion it, 100 different ways, send it out. So for every bill that is paid that would be removed with this ordinance, we lose money. So that is something to keep in mind. I do believe this is solving a problem for us. Our current staffing, it doesn't include the TDLS work. So this is new. And so it is work we've been absorbing for the last couple of years, and it is a concern. And so I am hoping that the low value ordinance will address that one problem of the delinquent sales on properties that are so low that the county will lose money by proceeding. And then to keep in mind that as long as we keep it on the roll, we have no choice but to use all our collection tools and everything under the R&T code to collect on them all the same. So we don't get to choose not to use certain collection tools on them. We have to use it all, which ends up being, I don't know, a couple of $1,000s, I think, per. And again, we're losing money on those. So I really want to make sure that we all understand that.
Just to clarify, and we've talked about this in the past, what Genevieve just said, which was 50 cents, is the full 1%. As you guys know from the past, Stephen Carter, it's not 50 cents. We get about 25 to 30 cents on the dollar. What is it? 23. I usually say a quarter because it moves up and down. So that is not 50 cents. It's less than that pays for the services. And so that's kind of part of the problem is we're at the point where it's costing more. Yes, we have the paper lot scenario, but this is costing more in process without that paper lot even being involved with it. And so 50 cents is being generous. And so, yeah, so just think postage and we're
certified letter.
We're cooked.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier.
Hours spent calculating the deficit, it was not even back.
One, if it rolls into delinquencies, then the cost goes up substantially, and then that cooked comment goes worse. And so the kind of math never pays out, even if we're not touching the paper lots. And I know we're kind of trying to solve or do the best we can solving multiple things at one time. But that's the one thing I would kind of keep in mind is the reason other counties have this in place is because a lot of them don't have paper lots like we do. But they have the same problem cost-wise. And so we are down to 7 counties who don't have it. As Patrick said, we're one of the 7. And there's a reason why all the rest have it, all the 51 have it, is because it's the cost. And we could probably even work up more numbers for you guys that wise, but it gets expensive pretty quick.
Supervisor Sabatier and then Supervisor Pyska.
So I'll keep my comment positive. We have a change, and his name is Mr. Sullivan, who has already done a Chapter 8 sale, both with special districts and with the city of Clear Lake. I've never seen that before. Maybe before my time those were happening. Timing-wise, he seems to have some busy schedules around December and April, and we need to time it because these Chapter 8s also take time in order to get accomplished, and there's a large number of properties. It's not going to happen all at once, but we have to be able to move forward and take that first step and rip the Band-Aid, and we need to rip the Band-Aid. Because, again, long-term solution, not short-term solution.
Supervisor Pyska?
I just want to bring up the other ethical question of putting these lots out to auction that aren't usable and aren't buildable, and we have unsuspected buyers that buy them, and then how much of your time is dedicated to explaining to people over and over that they've made a poor investment.
How much time do you want me to describe that?
Briefly.
A lot of time. Phone calls alone. Our average phone call, it probably takes, in our office alone, probably at least a half hour. So you saw earlier when we do an appeals, just for preparation of that appeal that we showed you is probably 12 to 20 hours. So most of our stuff is technical, just like the other two offices. When we explain stuff, it's math from start to finish, laws from start to finish. It's not easily explainable. It's probably half hour to 45 minutes, and we get a lot of phone calls as well as the other two offices. So yes, and that's not even calling out the working after you get off the phone call. So.
I'll open up for public comment. Is there any on Zoom, by the way? All right.
Good afternoon, Chair Crandall, board members, elected officials. Alan Flora, City Manager, City of Clear Lake. So I have nothing but respect for our treasurer tax collector, and I appreciate the administrative problem that the situation causes for a number of departments. But I'm here to ask you all to consider the community problem that I believe this ordinance will cause in some areas of the county. I feel like it's putting the city in a very tough spot, and it's eliminating one of our most powerful tools related to code enforcement and responsible property management. I think each of you could imagine what it would be like if you have a blighted or vacant property near your house that becomes subject to this ordinance. Perhaps owned by someone who inherited it from their grandparents that lives in San Jose. I don't expect that those folks are ever going to comply with our vegetation ordinance or any other action related to code enforcement on that property ever again. I pulled just a few quick numbers today. I was a little short on time, so unfortunately some of the numbers I pulled were based on total assessed value of $10,000, not $5,000, which is in the ordinance. But to give you some context, there's 1,488 vacant parcels in the city of Clear Lake. For comparison's sake, there's 2,470 total parcels in the city of Lakeport, so it's a significant issue for us. 50% of those, or 729, are worth less than $10,000. It goes down to 505 if we go to the 500,000 or $5,000 threshold. Shockingly, there's another 257 residential properties that also have a total assessed value of $10,000 or less. So that puts it 1,000 properties. You know, it's going to be a little different if the ordinance goes through. It's based on 5,000, not 10,000 I mentioned, but very significant issue in the city, and we do have some areas that are just, there's a lot of paper lots, but it's really scattered throughout. 483 of those parcels in the last 3 years have had some type of code enforcement case started on them, so that's 30%. So that's really where this concern lies. Of those 729, just the vacant parcels that I mentioned at 10,000 or less, only 120 of those properties are owned by someone who lives in the city of Clear Lake. So 84% have out-of-town owners. I don't know if you'll let me have just a couple more minutes. So, you know, that's the concern. I understand the administrative problem, but from a community perspective, I'm very concerned about how this ordinance is going to impact our ability to make continued improvements in an area that we all know is very blighted. And, you know, we have a significant problem, but the paper lots and other things, probably worse issue in Chair Crandall's district in some areas of the North Shore. And so, you know, I'm here because of the city issues, and because, you know, I think that while a lot of those paper lots are on the hillside up there and a real problem that we need to address, for us it's interdispersed throughout the city, and you know, which houses 25% of the entire population of the county. So I understand there needs to be a solution. I am supportive of some of the ideas that Supervisor Sabatier mentioned. I just really hope you don't move forward today because I feel like it's going to be very devastating. And at one point, I understood that Chair Crandall and Supervisor Rasmussen were working on a committee related to some paper lot issues. I think some similar discussions that would tie in really well with that, and I would hope to have the opportunity to coordinate and discuss sort of a hybrid solution perhaps moving forward. And, you know, just to add on to the point, I appreciate that there were a number of discussions with the fire districts, but you know, as taxing agencies, the cities, we're also going to be losing tax revenue from that. And I'm not as concerned about that small amount as I am our ability to put on direct charges on some of these properties and just deal with the code enforcement issues. So I feel like if we work together, we can find some solutions that I think will address all of the concerns that we have, and I hope that we have the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Alan, I think there's a question for you.
Yeah, I have
right
a
here.
question. For the code enforcement issues, what's the recovery rate for the properties in the city? Because we know that there's already high defaults, and so are these properties that people are actually paying on, or are these just running up the bills?
Well, I didn't run any analysis of that. I'd be happy to do so. I mean, there's certainly some of both. You know, our normal process now when we have code enforcement issues is to be fairly aggressive with administrative citations for a period of time. And in a lot of cases, I think we usually get around 65% compliance at some point on that. And then the next step when we don't have compliance is then to use those to put a lien on the property. And, you know, people don't like having liens on their property, but it doesn't necessarily create compliance because, you know, if I'm living in Prescott, Arizona, and I have this property up here, I don't really care if there's a lien on it or not if I'm not going to do anything with the property. So it's not a fail-safe. I mean, we have, you know, I guess this is getting beyond your question a little bit, but we have looked at actually being able to foreclose on some of the liens that we have because, you know, a lien isn't 100% solution either, but I just feel like it's one of the key tools in our toolbox that we have. The threat of having a lien on your property, people don't like that.
So I have a question then. So is there a way to still allow for liens if we're not taxing?
So the liens, code enforcement liens, would still be able to be applied by each jurisdiction. But I think the difference, and Mr. Flores is correct in this, that they wouldn't be part of the tax, the secured role anymore. What I would say is that usually by the time one of these liens gets to the point where it's involved in an auction, the property is often underwater at that point because the lien, any bill that attaches grows at 18% interest per year. So plus the penalties on top of the tax bill, it's a pretty large amount. So a lot of our lien sales, and I can't speak for everything in Clear Lake, but a lot of our lien sales that we see where there was a code lien, it turns into a deficit sale where we just aren't recovering what's owed. We're having to drop the bid to get it moving.
Okay. Well, I think it would, and I know you want to follow up, but I think it would be really helpful to understand kind of more of these details of how many of these properties are not recoverable. And I think that's going to help us figure out next steps also. So
Go ahead.
Jim.
I just wanted to clarify if it was saying that we lose a tool because the expectation is to go clean up the property and put the full amount cost on the tax bill, which then makes the tax bill very difficult to pay, and then often the bill is higher than what the property is worth. And then in the end, that's where a lot of the repay schedule that at the end of this I'm going to be asking is because once it sells, there's not enough to recover. So it might look good up front, but it's running up the bill, as you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just last question, just to clarify a little bit, is just because this low value ordinance is going to exist, kind of like we talked about with the work in my office, it's still going to continue, meaning I'm going to still do a calculation. I'm still going to put a value on. The value is just going to be now under the 5,000 threshold, which will then hit a trigger, which will basically not send out a bill. But there's still a valuation. It doesn't stop the process. It just basically puts like a floor to the process, I guess the way to describe it.
And just one other thing. I am definitely open to whatever solutions are out there and being discussed that I keep hearing about. So really, if there's another, our county comes up with another way to address this, we can, what is the word? We can get rid of the low value ordinance. We could change it with something else. We can replace it. But in the meantime, this would stop a lot of loss while the county is figuring out another solution.
Patrick, did you?
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, to all the comments Mr. Flora raised in the situation in the city of Clear Lake, I mean, those are all really valid comments, and this does not solve a lot of the problems. This is one piece, and there would still be other steps necessary. But what I guess the underlying issue is that when we leave these on the roll, just to be clear, we don't even list the properties right now unless generally in this category, unless we get specially requested to. We did do it in the city, but 78% of our parcels received no bid in the tax sale. And that's when we had all the good stuff. If we do an auction with all of these properties, I would anticipate no bids, or we get the bids where someone doesn't understand what they're doing, they bid, we all get those calls and, you know, people that are upset. So I think what my concern is that leaving them on the roll doesn't really fix it, because I can't sell them, nor would I expect the city to be able to, you know, foreclose, or a district to foreclose on them and turn a profit, right? It's not sustainable money-wise. So there does have to be a bigger solution. Our office definitely would want to be a part in any way we can to help with that. I would echo the same sentiment. If a solution's identified, we can always rescind this ordinance or amend it, do whatever we need to do. But right now, the way the state controller sees it, and I've met with them repeatedly, they're saying we have to try to auction everything. That's why you don't see unsecured on here. Because on unsecured, if there's a boat that's worth $200, I am not mandated to seize it, you know, moor it, and auction it. I can look at that boat and say it's not worth our time. It's going to cost more to do this than the recovery. Unfortunately, on real property, the secured role, I'm not given that choice. The state's made it very clear that no matter what, I have to try to auction them. So it's put us in this loop. I feel like we have no escape. But Supervisor Sabatier's proposal, for instance, that would work. It would solve the problem for us that we can't sell them in auctions. If there's agencies that want to buy them, they can. But so far, agencies, whether it's schools, special districts, city, county, we've never been asked to sell more than a few dozen at a time. No agency has come forward and said, we can buy all of these, we can hold them, because the cost was too much. So that's part of what brought this forward. I think if agencies had come forward and said they could do that, you probably wouldn't see the three of us here today. But no one has said that they can, and I haven't heard today that the county can. And like I said, as far as I know, the city is not able to do more in terms of purchasing than what it has at any one time. So I'm sorry it's come to this. There doesn't appear to be another option right now.
Vice Chair, and then Rich, I'll let.
So we've already sent out the tax bills for this year, right? Because we're paying them right now. So what would be, when would this come up again? When would this next bills, if we didn't pass this today and it came back later, what would be the deadline for knowing whether or not we were going to bill?
Bills go out in October, but Mr. Ford's office might.
Yeah, so we're working the next tax roll. We work it the minute we close the last tax roll. We're building it, basically stacking stuff on top of each other. So the longer you guys go towards, call it July 1, the more it's going to be difficult to make that happen, meaning I'm going to have to go to Megabyte, get some kind of patch if I'm going to try to get it applied. Because once you guys make an ordinance, I got to get it done, right? And so that's part of it. But I wanted to make a point, and it's kind of come up a little bit, is the three of us are finance, right? We're the finance floor, we're finance. When we see this type of cost leakage would be the answer, we have a fiduciary duty to come and tell you. And so that's what's happening here. Now, it sounds like there's a bunch of other solutions that, or problems that we're trying to solve at the same time, but the real answer is we have a fiduciary duty to present this to you and ask you guys to stop the cost leakage. So that's why we're here. I mean, I understand there's a bunch of other stuff, and paper lots have been around for, 100 years, like we talked about in the past, been around a long, long time. And I would love to see those stop, because those are other things in my office. But we have a fiduciary duty, and we're all three finance. We all have different components of finance. We all have finance background. And we have fiduciary duty to come and present this to you and ask you for this. If you guys say no, that's on you. But we've done our job to present it to you and say, look, it's losing money, it's a loss, and it's a loss irrespective of the paper lots. And so we have a responsibility to come and send and ask you for it. So that's the one point I want to make sure is this is what we have to do. If you guys say no, that's a different answer. We can come back to you and try and work with you on the different components. But to be honest, the other components are not ours. I don't want to say it like that, but.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that. The reason I asked was to see if it would make any sense to have some more time to see if another option could be there. But I know this is costing us more money to do than we're recovering. So we're continuing to go in the hole. And I do appreciate city manager's comments, because those are valid concerns with the code enforcement. But also in what I've looked at with the paper lots so far, that's also going to cost an enormous amount of money to come to a solution, I think. So we're just in a bad situation with the financial cost right now.
There was a public comment still on Zoom. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Supervisors. I was just listening to this, and Mr. Sullivan had said many months ago he would be bringing this forward. I see this as an attempt to stop the bleeding. It's not an end-all solution, but it is a step in the right direction. As staff has mentioned, a 1% tax on $5,000 doesn't even cover the postage to send the bill out. As a resident in one of the largest fire districts and most underfunded ones, seeing this on the agenda, I was concerned about the fire district's ability to collect their fees. I want to say thank you to Mr. Sullivan for addressing that concern and for reaching out to the fire chiefs. I'm happy to hear that a process for them to collect their fees will remain in place. And thank you for bringing this forward.
Any other public comment? I will close public comment. Supervisor Owen.
Yeah, I had a question. If you're not sending out the bills, will the taxes still continue to acquire? No, so they just won't be taxed.
That's correct. The
Okay.
properties under 5,000 will no longer accrue a tax liability as long as this ordinance is in effect.
So they'll be tax-free.
It would be tax-free.
Okay, and then the second one, would that make it more difficult if there's a plan? I know when I first came on, I don't remember where I heard it or something, but they were talking about maybe putting some of these pieces, these paper subdivisions together to make larger lots to make it more valuable. Would it make it more difficult to acquire and make changes so that it can help the county and that they would be of some value?
I think it could in some circumstances, but typically, no. No matter what happens here in most of these areas, it's a checkerboard. So on a given block, half of them are tax defaulted, half aren't. So if the county or an agency ultimately wanted to acquire the entire set of low-value lots in that area, or lots, you'd probably have to use eminent domain. Frankly, I don't know of another way that you could get them all at once. But you are correct, it could limit the ability in some cases.
And just to speak to that a little bit, we see the sales, there's some guys out there that sell this continually. And they'll go in and they'll sell it for a little bit, and then it seems to be that they contact the guy who bought it and said, do you want to sell it? And they seem to kind of, just go around and around. But as far as combining it, yeah, you'd almost have to be concentrated and say, I'm going to attack these 10 parcels at one time. And there are some code that you could probably merge them faster and easier, but you'd have to, if you do them all at one time, that would be probably pretty cost prohibitive.
And that's what I was wondering is if it would actually tie our hands, if there were some projects that we looked at for some type of housing, whether it be veterans or whether it be of low income, or even if it's for a park, if putting some of these together and creating something that could be beneficial, I just didn't know if that would hinder that thought process.
Go ahead.
Okay, one last comment for the Clear Lake City Manager. If there's an opportunity to add direct charges, if, say, this does get approved, what I want to propose is that we could do something similar that we're doing for the fire districts to allow you to go ahead and put charges on and send a bill out, and then it just wouldn't go through the lien process at the end of the year. We would reconcile it with you.
Supervisor Sabatier, you put your pen up.
I would like to have till the end of January to come back with a solution. And at that point, if I'm not able to bring something back, please go to the tax defaulted GIS map and go see what we are dealing with and what we are talking about. It is almost completely vacant in certain areas and a monstrosity in other areas. And so we are literally looking at very specific areas and saying, we don't really, I don't want to say we don't care, but we're going to forget about you. Nothing's going to change out there. And I know that you guys are the financial people, but you got to be less myopic than this, because your loss is going to be the loss at code enforcement in dealing with the fact that we're not solving the problem. Look at what we're doing with the copter in the area that they're working on. They are doing excessive amount of work in those specific parcels right now, just like the city's doing excessive amount of work in those parcels. And it's difficult because when's the last time somebody surveyed out there to know which specific property we're actually looking at and talking about? So being able to actually put these liens on specific properties puts a certain risk on us that we may not even be doing the right cleanup in the right place and putting the lien on the right property. We have to be able to solve this problem. So I'm requesting, please give me till the end of January. This is not a solution. I do not want to see another tax sale with any of these properties on there. That's the worst in comparison to just sending out bills. And there's a way forward. So please provide me that time.
So Pat and then Supervisor Pyska.
I did just want to add in response to Supervisor Sabatier's comment, whatever your board decides to do today, I would really ask that you don't go much past the end of January, because there is another aspect to this. We do have to recode our software if this ordinance passes, and we have to work with Megabyte, our software vendor. Like I said, Rich, his office has processes that are going in place in June. Everything has to be in by July, so much past January, if your board decides to do this, we will be very short on time. In even March, I don't know that we could do it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the calendar, and I think you're going to have to do it by the second week of January. This is something that we've talked about for a long time. I'm not willing to let this go on anymore. So we'll give you a little bit of time to work on it and bring some solutions, but we have a fiscal responsibility also. And this doesn't have to solve everything, but we can give you a little bit more time, but we just can't have this conversation indefinitely, which is what we've been doing for a long time.
But, I mean, just an example, if it passes, can't we come back in January and change it? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
My understanding is you can change it at any time. The same
Good,
comment
yeah.
that Patrick just said, though, is we have kind of a cycle. So if there's a consideration that we put in place and you want to change it down the road, let's talk, make sure that we kind of cycle, because essentially, like we said, we're building the next year as we go. Right now we're building it, and as we close the tax roll, it's basically July 1 roughly. And so once we get to that point, if we pass an ordinance before, that has to be in place when I run basically the whole process to build the tax roll.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I'll vote on this today. We just haven't heard from you.
Vice Chair.
Well, I was just gonna, that's kind of why I asked about it earlier. I'd be comfortable with holding off until January if supervisor believes that that's doable to have a possible solution.
You're willing to move
Yeah,
today? I'm willing to move today. I think it's important.
I absolutely believe it's important. However, I would like to see if we can come up with a better solution. And I think this brought it to our attention, and I absolutely appreciate you bringing it to us. And I understand what it's doing. But I would also like to have a better solution if we can find one in January, by January.
Yeah, so the.
Did you,
the-
she was just gonna.
I just wanted to mention that, that when we talk about the loss, that we are talking about the general fund. So it isn't my office or my budget or his budget. This is the general fund and everything impacted.
Thank you.
And then, lastly, I wanted to ask, because I'm not sure when the right time is, I wanted to bring something back. It was the 3-year repay schedule for the TDLS sales, the 160 to 162, where I wanted to request that the repayment schedule would be over 3 years, and it would be split to 2 payments per year. And so I was requesting approval, and I was going to put it on the next agenda, if that was okay, if the board was okay with that.
Wait a second, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, so the TDL, so the impact, so part of this presentation was I wasn't sure where it was going to fit in, so I'm shoving it in. So the 3-year repayment schedule is something that we've talked about, all the agencies that owe back from the last TDLS distribution. And so I wanted to propose a 3-year repayment schedule where I would withhold each year out of the 2 teeter distributions, which is the largest distribution that we give each year. For example, Lake County Fire Protection receives about 1.43 million. Instead, they'll receive 1.33 million. So it'll just sort of mitigate the budgetary impact of the repayment.
Lloyd, did you have something?
I don't see that in the.
I don't think it's on.
No, it's not. And so I'm talking, because I was going to submit it on the next agenda, but I needed to
December
talk
9th.
about it during this.
I don't think we
to
can
then-
talk about and give you consensus without it being on the agenda.
Yeah. So we can only deal with what's on right for today and go from there.
Yeah, I think, so originally when this item came to your board last time, the low value ordinance, the authorization for it, the item Genevieve was bringing up was the first half of that item because there was a link between them. But today we don't have that piece
All right.
in here.
Well, Thursday we talked about it. Was
So
going to be
I don't think
Yeah.
she needs our approval. She has the authority to put it on an agenda
Yeah.
in the future
Yeah, you.
at her discretion.
So do you want a presentation? Can it just be on consent? Is this?
Well,
that's-
We
Lloyd
can't
says
discuss
talk about
that.
Sorry,
that, so
okay,
We're
so
gonna have to just
then
move
I'll
on with
just
what we
wait.
have.
You can place it on.
Just, all right.
All right. Ready for action?
I would like to say that we move this to be continued in January.
We've got the first 2 weeks of January.
So with the item before your board is the,
Calendar.
Well, we have a holiday and then we have the governance workshop.
Oh, it's the governance workshop.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out why. Okay. Yeah, I'll bring it back if I have nothing, then on January 13th, go ahead and bring this back.
Well, are you,
So we'll have to do it 14 days ahead of that.
well, are you gonna coordinate with
So you have
them
to do
so
it
that
date
it's
certain.
more,
I can't work in a void. I have to work with staff from admin. I have to work.
okay, I
with-
just wanna make sure that so there's lots of input when we get.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get that.
We can participate in any meeting or provide any resources that are necessary.
Uh,
We don't need a motion, just direction, right?
well,
Yeah, we have to renotice it, date and time.
So
certain.
I move to continue this item to January, was it 17th?
13th.
13th,
At 11 a.m.
at 11 o'clock. And if there's something to place before that date on the agenda or that date, it would be one to compete against it because looking for another solution. But my plan is to bring it back before the January 13th date.
that would be.
That's a motion.
Yes, and so waiting for a second
Second.
for your board's consideration.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries 4-1. All right, we're gonna have to go into close. Can we still go into closed section or? No?
My untimed item coming.
All right, we'll go into closed session and we'll come back.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you may want to announce the closed session item.
Yes, okay. Our next item is going to be
Myopic.
9.1, public employee appointment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, B1, interviews for Chief Public Defender, appointment of Chief Public Defender. We'll go into closed session.